Hey folks, welcome back to the shop. Today I think I'm going to do a little video, just tips and tricks for the pen maker. I get asked a lot how I get my cuts so smooth and my shavings fly so nice. And I use carbide tools. And I've showed before my carbide tool that I made myself. And uses a round, I believe it's 12mm round bit. I buy the bits from Amazon and I go through quite a bit of them. These are the ones I prefer. They're a UFA tool, or however you want to pronounce that. And they work very well. They're exceptionally sharp, sometimes a little too sharp. And you have to be very careful with a brand new bit. I also get some cheaper ones off of AliExpress. They come from China in about 2 weeks, and they're not as sharp, but they're half the cost. This is about $50 for 10 of them, and the ones that come from China are 10 of them for about $22 with shipping. So the thing about using carbide is works the same as if you were using your traditional skews or gouges. Like when you're taking your traditional skew and you're making a cut, you place it on the work and lift in until you start to cut. The more you lift in the back, the more aggressive the cut. It's called riding the bevel. Now I do the same thing with my carbide tools, except it's a little more forgiving. And along with the carbide, you can use it as a skew or a scraper, depending on how you turn it. Like, I don't use a skew much on acrylics because just don't seem to have the need for it. The scraper works just fine. But if I was making a straight, I might come in with my skew. I like to raise my tool rest a little bit and sit right on the top of the work when I use the skew. Now this skew I just sharpened, so it's very sharp. And I come in on the top and again lay it on the top, keeping both points well away from your work if you can, cutting just in the center portion. And you can take such a fine shearing cut, it'll almost polish it. And this is a hybrid with feathers and moss and pine cones in it, so it's not going to do a real good job shining it up. But as you can see, it's a little smoother than what happens if I do the same thing with my carbide. Carbide leaves a little bit of lines to it. Now, I've got my work all finished up here. It's all shaped about the shape I want it. And I got a few spots where I'm gonna have to probably come in with a little coating of CA glue, extra on top of my finish. I'm gonna do that right now. I'm just gonna come in with a little bit of thin because the end of this feather is poking up right here. And I wanna stabilize that before I sand it. That way it'll sand flush with the rest of the acrylic. Now, thin super glue is probably the biggest pain in your butt in your entire shop. When you drop it, it shoots and goes everywhere. Don't try to catch it. You will end up glued to yourself. But with that, and I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of activator. You don't really need to use activator on thin, but I'm trying to get this done quickly, so I'm gonna use a little activator on it. Now, when sanding acrylics, I always sand wet the whole way through. Some people sand up to 600 or 800 and then go dry or then go wet. I find it's just easiest to, and it uses a lot less sandpaper to go through the grits and just go wet. That's why I buy cloth backed sandpaper. Now, I don't like buying sandpaper and buying sandpaper and buying sandpaper, which you still have to do no matter what. So I mark each one with a Sharpie with the grit so I don't get confused and mess up my progression. Because nothing's worse than you get all the way through, you hit 800 grit, and then you grab that next sandpaper and you grab the 150 and you gotta start all over. So I mark them and try to keep them in order on my little tub here. And this is actually a kitchen organizer that I got. I think it's actually for ice. I got it from Target for like $4. The other one I had was blue and got kind of nasty, and it was kind of flimsy. So this one's nice and sturdy, just the right size to fit a diamond painting pen or an ink pen. Although if I do minis, I have to use a different tub, because I'm trying to keep the splashes off my deck, which is a challenge in itself. But when I'm sanding, like I said, I mark them all, and I go through my automotive grits, which is a 2000 and a 1000. And then I usually either go to the buffer or another buffing medium like Dr. Kirk's Micro Magic or a Zona sandpaper. The Zona's not bad. I like it better than the Micro Mesh, but it seems to take a little bit more time than the Micro Magic or just going straight to the buffing wheel. Now I start with the 150, and the 150 is there just to get you as smooth and chip free, taking out those lines from the cutting. And you have to work the sandpaper. And once you get it feeling fairly smooth, you can move on. I know a lot of people look at me and they go, "Oh, you're touching the spindle." It's not as dangerous as it looks. This one is pretty held between centers with just friction on each end. This little bushing that I make is pressing in on this end. This is pressing in on that end. It can stop real easy. And I gotta tighten up the tailstock. So there's no risk of it hurting me other than the occasional friction burn, which dry sanding causes a lot of. But you can see I get a lot of buildup while I wet sand on the sandpaper. And some of the sandpapers rinse out a little better than others. What I'm using right now came from PSI, and it's pretty good. It's not like the mesh sandpaper that's out there, which is more expensive, and it works fairly well. But if you do a lot of punky or soft woods, that mesh can leave a imprint of the screen in the material that you have to then go back and sand out. So I just use the cheap stuff because I go through so much of it. Okay, I've got it all sanded up here. I've gone all the way through to 2000 grit. A little smoother than I probably should go when I do a CA finish, but I'm gonna do a CA finish now. I'm gonna clean this up, make sure there are no pits or any spots that need filled with the CA glue. It looks pretty good. I got a little white showing up around these. I'm gonna hit that with a brush, if I can find one. Always keep a couple of these little nylon brushes around when you have little pits, where when you're doing hybrids, especially pine cones. The seeds, if you can see the seed and here, and some of the other spots in here, will leave voids. No matter if you stabilize them or not, the stabilizing solution will not adhere or penetrate the seed. I think it's because they have a little too much fats and sugars and all that keeps the plant growing. So I'm just taking this and I'm going to hit any of the spots that have sanding dust built up in them, or that have turned white. And I'm using it wet, just with water. Okay, that's pretty good. Now you gotta dry it off real good, completely, before you start applying your CA. CA doesn't like water, it activates if you put water in it. So with a nice clean piece of blue shop towel, I've tried other paper towels. Some of them will work, like I believe Viva works. Some of the cheaper ones that don't have any dyes work, but the ones that have dyes, or some of the other ones like Bounty, have something in them that makes the glue cure in the paper towel. It'll actually start to smoke. I've never had one catch on fire, but the smoke is not very good to smell, and it's probably not very good for your lungs. So I do 2 coats of thin, and I cut the piece off with a pair of scissors, so there's a clean piece of paper towel on every swipe. You can wear rubber gloves if you want. I get so much super glue on my fingers, I just gave up. Now I move on to the medium CA, and this is just stick fast. I mean, I know some people have their favorite brands that they prefer, and I like Stickfast. Bob's makes a good one. Bob Smith Industries makes a nice CA glue, and there are a few others out there that I haven't tried. I hear that the Mercury makes a nice, a good CA. I've been thinking about trying their Flex for my ink pens. But I go through and I just apply with a little bit on a paper towel. Spray in between. Not a lot, just enough to just start that reaction. The most important part of this is just keeping your motion smooth. If you're jerky, or you'll get little beads of CA that have cured, little bubbles that cured. It's not good. And you have to sand those off, and it's a whole thing. I also tend to, if I'm doing a larger piece, or I'm doing a piece with some center art like rings or divots or lines, I'll do in sections. I'll do the center itself with 3 or 4 coats of thin and 3 or 4 coats of medium, getting all the little crevices, and then I leave that alone because that's going to get minimally sanded. And I'll do this side, then that side, and I'll do each side all by itself. And when I do it, I'll leave a line, go with a longer bit of super glue on your paper towel, and then just use the very tip of it to feed it. And as you go through, you can go down to your reserve that you have at the bottom. That's at least how I do it. And then I usually just go 1 paper towel's worth of CA glue. Whatever that ends up being is how many coats I put on. And when you do ink pens, I try to keep the super glue off of the bushings. That's harder than it sounds sometimes, but I think we're good on, yeah. We're pretty good there. And this is a natural hybrid, so if there's a pit or a little spot, I don't fill them necessarily. I'll leave them in there. Shows that it's handmade, shows that these are natural materials. And this blank itself, I made this last night. Yes, you can turn a Lumilight within 24 hours. Some people tell you can't. I do all the time. But only if it's the large blocks. 3 or more blanks. Now here I'm going to hit it with a little bit of, if I can find it, 600 grit sandpaper. This is just taking off all the top ridges left behind by the paper towel. And I go the 800. You don't want to sand through your finish, although sanding through the finish of acrylic isn't as bad as sanding through the finish of wood. You may not even notice if you do it on acrylic. And we hit 1,000 grit. 2,000, and it should be a pretty shiny finish from here. And from here, there are tons of different ways to finish it from this point. I've tried them all. I've done buffing compound and Plastic X, car rubbing compound, Zona. I like Dr. Kirk's. And no, he's not a sponsor. I wish I had a sponsor. I'd make more of these videos if I had sponsors. But from Dr. Kirk's, it's real easy. Nice folded up piece of paper. Medium speed on your lathe. A little bit on a paper towel. Cover the whole thing and buff it up. Only takes a couple minutes. Easier on your hands than using the buffing wheel. I got a little carpal tunnel in my hands. A buffing wheel, if I'm buffing a lot, will really make them hurt. And you can see that's already brought up a nice shine. Step 2, same way as step 1. A little bit on a paper towel. Just get it coated first. And buff it up. And tips for all you beginners that have just started and want to make things like ink pens, handles. Don't spend too much money worrying about buying expensive chucks and whatnot. I'd say your most important things to buy when you're first starting out is an adjustable mandrel, a drill chuck, a cone-shaped center, live center, and a jaw chuck. This is just the cheapest utility jaw chuck. This is a C-style. It has lasted me since I started. It was the first chuck that I bought, and it's the only chuck that I ever use. I would like to have a Nova chuck, compare them to one of the Easy chucks, but they're very expensive. So I think I got this on sale for $50, but that was like 7 years ago. Now, last step on the number 3. This part just brings it up to its final shine. Go, nice and crystal clear. You can see all the pine cones and the feathers and that little bit of moss that's in there. And sometimes you'll get a little bit of CA right at the end. You can either take that off with a pocket knife, or I take it over in my disc sander and just flatten out these ends real quick. Gives it a little bit more finished look. Okay, for my last set of tips that I'm going to give out on this video is for the more advanced wood turners out there, the ones that want to stabilize their own materials, maybe for casting, maybe just for turning later, is get a good pressure pot or good vacuum pot. This is a glass vac, and it's from Best Value Vacs. And I've had good luck with this company, and their customer service is excellent. I also buy my wood stabilizing resin from them, It's pretty much the same as what cactus juice is, or the stick fast version. But what I do is I made my own little weight, and it's just a piece. This is actually a piece of Pergo flooring, laminate flooring. There's some holes drilled in it. Put a couple old sockets on there for weight, and I use a square vase that I got from my wife's work. She's a florist. And right now I'm stabilizing some applewood. This is all some spalted stuff that I've been drying for a while. My father-in-law gave it to me, I believe, last July when they cut down a apple tree on the family property. And I've been drying it in here for about a year, and then before I stabilize it, I bake it in my toaster oven for about an hour and on 150 degrees, and then I just leave it overnight in the toaster oven, and I start stabilizing it the next day. Now the instructions, and other people will tell you, when you're stabilizing, vacuum it for 12 hours, 14 hours, all different numbers. What I say is, as long as you have, put it under vacuum. Don't leave it under vacuum for more than 48 hours. They say that it can start to cure. So, I'm not sure exactly why, but that's what the manufacturer says. So, now I usually go several cycles with vacuum. I'll vacuum it and leave it overnight, and then the next day I'll go in and let the air out, put the air back in a couple different times, move things around, especially if I'm dyeing. Like right now I have a couple pieces in here that are dyeing. This is going to be blue and purple, and this is the other part of the blue and purple. This is the blue, that's the purple, that's the blue, and that's just dyed with Lumelite dyes. And this is a piece of spalted, and it's going to be pink. Looks a little orangey right now, but it will turn pink. This is the color, the pink. Now, I just take these over to my toaster oven. I mount it up on the wall here. And as you can see, it's set at 200 degrees. And I customized mine with a added little rack so that crank guns don't fall through. Just load them up in there. And do not do this in your house. It does not smell very good. I'm not sure if breathing these fumes is very good for you. But it does work really well out in my garage. My wife was happy when I took this toaster oven. That meant she got a new one. They're all loaded up in there. I'll leave them under convection. I use the convection setting on here. I'll set it for 1 hour, and I'll leave it overnight after it dings. Well, that's all the tips and tricks I got for you today. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching.